promise, no one fights alone. In-depth conversations about mental health and culture in the first responder space. We're joined by your co-hosts Austin Pedersen and Brad Shepard.
Austin, it's so good to be back on the podcast again after taking some time off. And we just knocked one out earlier that was absolutely amazing. And I'm looking forward to our next interview right now.
Yeah, what do you call it? The new
They are
generation
lit.
says our guests are fire.
Is that
You know, these are there's some lit guests we have coming on. Yeah, it sounds so wrong coming out. I just don't. It doesn't make sense to me.
is abnormal? That's because you're getting old, Austin. But it's
Fuck
okay.
yeah, I'm
Just lean into it.
bald, man. Yeah,
You're,
bald, blind. But this man right here, we love this guy. He does need to accept that he's going bald, but other than that,
Listen.
I have nothing negative to say about him.
The listeners are going to be so jacked up to hear that Thor is coming on our podcast, swinging Thor's hammer.
That's right. He's over here. Yeah, he's over here laughing because he knows it's the truth.
This is Chateau's very own Doug McGraw. He is an amazing human being. He once I'm going to give you a little bit of bio for him. He pitched minor leagues for the Astros and the White Sox. He's a firefighter for 24 years up in Colorado. Awarded 2 life-saving recognitions. Peer sport guy, aspiring actor. I'm not sure if that ugly mug can make it on the actor scene, but hey, we're going to swing for the fence on that. Our very own Chateau, tall, dark, and handsome Thor, Doug McGraw. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. And that was a good introduction. It's almost like I wrote it myself. Oh, man.
Man, I'm so glad to have you on here. And
I was going to say, I should have added to the, also rescued a goose off of the ice one year. So there's a good story behind that.
Were you sober then?
Yeah, I was at work. It was a legit call. We got called out by the Division of Wildlife because there's these 2 geese stranded on the ice because they were domesticated geese, and the people that owned them released them to the wild, and they had their wings clipped and they couldn't fly, and so they didn't know like when the lake was going to freeze over, so they were stuck out there. And then there's a cliff next to the lake, and there's a bunch of golden eagles nested up there, so they called us out. They said, man, we need to get these geese off of here so families that come out here and picnic don't see a full-on or golden eagle mauling a goose in the middle of the lake. So yeah, I went out there in an ice rescue suit and everything.
That should go on your resume as well. I think that's a classy tale.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, thanks for coming on. Without kind of bantering too much longer, you got a great story, man. I want to dive into this. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and then let's dive into kind of what brought you here today.
So if we go back, just to kind of capture who I am. I was born in Austin, Texas. Grew up in Dallas, Texas, in a little town, Duncanville. So good childhood, good upbringing, good parents, and I should say this as I talk about my childhood, having maybe jumping the gun here, but having gone through recovery and then looking back where I reframe and have a different perspective on my past. I don't look at it negatively anymore. So as I tell this story, I don't want that to come across. Yeah, I grew up in a good home. Grew up Southern Baptist. So the things that go along with that, come along with it as far as a strict upbringing, and my parents were strict, but they were fair. And my dad was a perfectionist, and my mom was, I'd probably call her a passive aggressive perfectionist. A lot of things in childhood and growing up were externally motivated. You got accolades for good grades, you got accolades for being a good athlete. If I didn't get good grades, say I got a B or a C in a class, you'd get the belt. In fact, growing up, we had a belt hanging on the hall closet on the doorknob. So, when I look back on that, did those things have an effect on where I ended up and where I am now? Absolutely. But when I look back on that now, parents are doing the best they could. And if you're a parent yourself and you have kids, that they don't come with instruction manuals and you mean nothing but the best for them. So along with that, with that kind of that external accolades, if you will, of the way we got recognition, one of them was sports. And that's where, I was a good athlete and I loved it. I love sports. I love football, I love basketball, I love baseball. So that's, I poured a lot into that growing up. Just one, because I loved it, and then two, to I got recognition. Did have some childhood trauma. Also, I was sexually abused by a neighbor when I was in fourth or fifth grade, and that's something I've never. I mean, this is going to go out public, so everybody's going to know now. But up until now, really only a few close people, and then folks at Chateau knew about that. So that definitely has an effect as you move through life. That's kind of the elementary, junior high years, and then high school years. That's when I shifted to just baseball, and I knew, okay, this is what I want to do, and I was good at it. And but again, I got the external recognition for that. I didn't really have any issues with alcohol. And if I could kind of back up, or no, I'll get to it, is what I ended up at Chateau for. I'll get to that in a minute. But I really didn't have issues with alcohol in high school. I mean, you did do normal teenage drinking, but other than that, really didn't mess with anything like that. But I do think one thing that I did have personality-wise that, is both good and bad is just kind of the highly competitive nature and highly competitive instinct is just I wanted to win at all costs. I hated losing more than I enjoyed winning. That it's good and bad because it made me incredibly driven to be good at what I did, but then also even with stuff outside of that, you kind of go. I don't have a middle ground. I don't have a 5. I have a 1 or a 10. I'm either going to go all in or I'm all out. So I played baseball in high school, and then my senior year, actually my sophomore, junior year, I switched over to pitching. I always was a catcher, so then I switched over to pitching, and senior year started getting looked at colleges and pro scouts and everything, and I pretty much knew I was going to get drafted. And so it came down to my choices of where to go to college. I got it down to University of Miami or University of Arkansas. And I chose University of Arkansas because it was close to home and parents were going to be able to see me play. But then I was drafted in the 9th round by the Chicago White Sox. So, I'm sitting there, a high school kid, 9th round pick. It's like, all right, you're going to give me a signing bonus and you're going to pay for my school. If they draft you out of high school, at least back then, it may still be the same way now. They have to pay for your college. So I was like, all right, well, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to the pros. I mean, that's the whole reason I would have gone to college anyways. So I did that, and then kind of back up a little bit. The first time I ever drank alcohol, I think when the switch was flipped was in junior high on a trip to Florida with friends. We're drinking on the beach there. And so I think that's where the switch was flipped and then led to when I get to, how I ended up at Chateau. So I went off to play baseball. I graduated high school, and within a couple of weeks, I was on an airplane to Florida, however many thousand miles away that is, to play a professional sport, have my own money. Didn't need anything from mom and dad, and 18-year-old kid. Show up to the airport. Here you go. You're living life for real. And it was fun. I had fun. It taught me a lot. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back and do anything different. But one of the things there that I look back on after, doing the work at Chateau and with the counselors is there was a lot that was driven into us there. One of the things was that you didn't take anything from anyone, and that you better believe that you were the best thing going or you were going to just get eaten alive. So that creates a mentality too, that it's like, well, you know what, I can do whatever I want and I can handle it because they told me that. But also you're critiqued every single day. The stress that you're under that kind of creates, and being a people pleaser already, and then you're in an environment like that, you're critiqued every day. Every single day they're evaluating you, and every single day you could be told, pack your bags, you're going somewhere else. And in fact, I hardly ever unpacked my bag. I basically lived out of a suitcase. So I played minor league baseball for 5 seasons, 4 seasons with the White Sox and 1 with the Astros. And then, I'd gotten married in my last season, in the off season before I went to go play for the Astros. And that's when I was just like, you know what, I've had enough of this. I was kind of really wasn't moving up, and hadn't been to college yet, and I'm married, and I was like, if I keep just spinning my wheels at this, where am I going to end up? And then, like I said, the drinking was it would have been no different than like you were at college drinking. So I decided to quit playing, and I don't think I ever really truly reconciled with that of quitting playing, because there for a long time I always would think back like, man, what if I'd have just stuck it out? Could have made it. And so that was a lot of the stuff too that the work at Chateau and post Chateau that I worked through too, was just dealing with that. Uh, so then, I'm married, come home.
So at this point, I'm kind of overview where you're at then as a young man. Your intensity level, you described it as there, you don't, a five doesn't exist. So as a young man, you're pegging out at a 10 almost on a daily basis, if not of your own volition, then somebody near you or coaching you or inspiring you is pushing you to that 10 level. You're operating at such an intense level at this point of your life. It's what that has to have been overwhelming. That has to have been almost a such an intense, hate to be repetitive of the word, but so dynamic on a daily basis of just how are you keeping up with that? Is that where the drinking helped?
If I look back on it, I, I I think so. I would say yes. At the time, no, I didn't think, because that was normal. That's what you did. That's you lived at that level. Like you said, just always spiked, and anything that you did. I mean, if you mowed the yard, it's like, I'm going to mow the best damn yard in the neighborhood. And I'd mow it sideways, this way, crossways, to make it almost perfect. But I think looking back now, that's where like the drinking, when I was playing, that yeah, that was didn't think of it, that was what it was, but that was a way to like quiet your mind down.
Sure.
Yeah, well, Doug, and I think this is a major part of the story here. So my father played professional football. Athletes as a whole, I feel like there's a lot of the what ifs, and my father suffered from alcoholism as well, and a lot of it was regret. If I hadn't have gotten injured, if this wouldn't have happened, and then it's such a different mindset. And I use the word civilian with this because you go from being this athlete, this, a big shot, right? And, everyone's, bragging on you, or they want to get to know you because you're this person. And then when that ends, your entire life changes, right? I mean, am I wrong there?
No, you're absolutely right, and that was a part of it. I mean, I still get in the mail, and I don't know how they find me, but like somebody will send me my baseball cards for me to sign and send to them. But you're absolutely right. Like making that transition, being an athlete to being a civilian was tough, because all of a sudden that's gone. You go 6,000 or however many thousand people aren't coming to watch you stock shelves at Home Depot. Nobody's chanting your name when you're sweeping the floor at
Yeah.
10 o'clock after closing. It's a huge life change. Yeah, and I don't think I ever really truly dealt with it, and I think that is something that I carried with me for a long time.
Okay, so let's transition then. Your what mental framework is happening here as you're transitioning to some life? You're making some life changes. You're staring at kind of what's in the future. How do we end up with the firefighter hero cape on? Get Take us down that road.
Yeah, so it was, I had my school's paid for, so I went back to school, and it was ended up I went to community college first, and then ended up going to University of Colorado Denver, and I thought I wanted to be an accountant. So I'm sitting in my intermediate financial accounting class going, this sucks. I remembered one of the guys I played baseball with, his dad had worked for, it was either LA City or LA County, and he was always out visiting. And I was like, man, that dude just always seemed to be like just happy. Like, and when he talked about his job, he just seemed like was having a good time. So I was like, you know what, let me look into this, see what's there. And so originally, I dropped out of college and just went to EMT school, because the plan was to originally was to be a flight nurse, because I thought, oh, that'd be fun to work in emergency medicine, be an EMT, be a medic, or be a flight nurse. And while I was in EMT school, my EMT school was taught by mostly firefighter paramedic, and we had to do our ride-alongs, our clinical. I did the ambulance ride-alongs. Like, okay, that's cool. And then I did the time in the ER, and I was like, oh, yeah, I could see myself doing this. And then when I did the ride-along with the fire department, I was like, oh, yeah, this is freaking awesome. This is what I want to do. because it just what it was. It captured as close as I could get back to playing baseball as I could in the civilian world. Just that same camaraderie and just some of the jocularity and the adrenaline and everything. So that's when I took the same approach that I did with anything else, like I did with baseball or anything else. Like, all right, I'm all in. We're gonna do this. And so that's when I decided to become a firefighter, and that was in 90. Started that in about 96 ish, and then got hired in 98. And I took that same approach with the testing process, and I came out number one on the testing process for the department I worked for, and then put in 24 years there. And if you look at the first part of my career, that wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Yeah, there was calls that affected me. I was tired. I drank, but I drank socially, casually, when we'd go out with friends on the weekend or whatever. And then, so, we had some marital issues, and I don't want to knock her down in any way or whatever, but there were some things going on. And so we ended up getting a divorce. So I've been divorced about 8, 9, almost 10 years now, I think, somewhere in there. But that, like, leading up to that was when things were like my irritability was high, depression was high, anxiety was high. And when I look back, I was suffering from the effects of PTSD. And I was starting to not drink like I was before I went to Chateau. But if we went to a party with friends, it was basically, how much can I drink? And how much can I numb myself from reality? And then we got divorced, and that's really when train went off the track. Because I got move out of the house, I get a 1 bed or 2 bedroom apartment. My son, when I had my kids, my son would stay in the living room. My daughter had a room. So that affected me as a dad. I was like, really, this is what I've come to. This is what I'm providing for my kids. And so that's when, when I had my time off from my kids and I was at home by myself, then I just sit around and drink and eat pizza and watch Netflix. But still, there was a part of me that was just, because in the first responder world and with fire service, it was almost kind of a badge of honor of like, oh, yeah, we're just irritable. That's who we are. You just need to understand us. Or yeah, I want to isolate in the basement and have nobody talk to me. It's like I've been busy saving lives, so you need to give me my space. And we drink. That's what we do. That it was like, so didn't still really wasn't thinking that, hey, there's really a problem. So kind of fast forward a little bit in February of 2022, a little bit before that. So in not 2022, 2021, 2020. I can't even remember the date now. I think it was 2021. So a couple months before that, I had to schedule an appointment with a urologist because I was having some urological issues. So I got in February. They're like, yeah, you got a problem. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I came to you. So what's the problem? And so it was basically I couldn't pee. Right? Yeah, the doc comes in, he's like, we got a problem. I'm like,
Yeah, no shit. No shit, right?
oh, if I
Yeah.
didn't have a problem, I wouldn't be here. I can't pee, doc. And
Yeah.
so like there was so much urine in my bladder that they're like, we got to check your kidney function. So they ordered an ultrasound. So they did the ultrasound and they found a mass in there. And they're like, yeah, we really don't like what we see, so let's do an MRI. So we did an MRI, and then I was having another procedure done so they could figure out why I couldn't pee. That day, as soon as that procedure got done, the doc had gotten the results from the MRI. He's like, hey, you know what, get dressed, do whatever. And he's going to go out. He's like, I'm going to go check the results of the MRI. I come walking out of the exam room, and the doc's just like white as a ghost. And I'm like, did you get the results? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, so? And he's like, you have cancer. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, you got a mass about this big in your right kidney. And I was like, so what does that mean? He's like, well, your kidney's going to have to be removed. I'm like, all right, well, when? He's like, as soon as possible. So a month later in March, I had my right kidney removed, and it was kind of interesting because it was like, I didn't really think too much of it. You always think, like, man, if I ever got diagnosed with cancer, how would I feel or what would I think? And I don't know. They told me you have cancer, and I was just like, all right, what do we need to do? Let's get rid of it. So anyway, so in March I had that removed, but when all this started in February, I went offline from the fire department, and then I was offline for about 6 months after having the kidney removed. And I think what happened there So over time, all the anxiety and PTSD and the drinking and everything had crept up on me to a point where I didn't really think that there was an issue. You know, I thought I had it under control. This is just how we are as firefighters. I'm okay. So, but I had that 6 months off, and what I noticed is I wasn't as irritable. I wasn't as depressed. I wasn't drinking as much. And I'm like, and I was ready to go back to work. I was excited. It's like, let's dig into this thing. And so I went back to work in October. A month later, November 28th, I walked through the doors of the Chateau. So from the time I went back online in October to the time I walked through the doors of the Chateau, it just completely exploded. And that was basically what it ended up being. Is I knew we worked a 48.96. So I knew, so 2 days on, 4 days off. So I knew when I got off on my 4 day in the morning, I knew what grocery stores and liquor stores opened at 8 in the morning. And I buy enough booze and enough food to last me my 4 days off. I would just lock myself up in my apartment, watch movies, drink, and eat frozen burritos. And then, you know, I was sitting there one morning having a whiskey with my morning breakfast burrito, watching, what was I watching? Couples Retreat. Sitting there watching Couples Retreat, eating a breakfast burrito and having a whiskey. And, I mean, I can laugh.
Vince Vaughn, baby.
Yeah, right. I mean, I can laugh.
Living your best life right there.
Living the dream. Yeah, living the dream.
Best. yeah, with my life is good t-shirt on. Yeah. So anyways, that's when I was just like, man, I don't want to live my life this way. This isn't what I was meant to do or be. So I made a call to our department counselor, and she's like, I feel like you need to go to treatment. I was like, I kind of feel that way too. And so she's like, well, what about Chateau? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm not kidding you, within not even an hour. So Spencer Rice showed up at my apartment, and then our counselor and her husband showed up, and then one of their nurses showed up. Then I was on the phone with Austin. Next thing you know, the apartment's full of people asking me questions. I'm talking to Austin. They're asking me what clothes I want to take, you know, and then it was kind of the typical, you know, you show up to Chateau, and once you finally get your bag from it being checked, you're like, shoot, I need to make an Amazon order because I got like one sock, a pair of underwear, and half a t-shirt, and nobody packed.
Yeah, that's accurate. I remember that 100%. I'm like, this guy did not bring enough stuff.
Yeah, and then you're like, man, you're like, what? I can wear sweatpants and a sweatshirt all day around here? Yeah. I mean, I was getting up in the morning, getting dressed and getting all nice. And then I was like, screw that. I'm wearing sweatpants and my house slippers and the sweatshirt. So, but anyway, so that's how I ended up at Chateau. That was 9 o'clock in the morning. I made the phone call to my counselor on November 28th, and 9 o'clock that night, I walked through the doors of Chateau, and it was like a freaking time warp. I walked in there, and I was just like, "What is going on?" So that's how I ended up at Chateau, and Ed kind of showed me around, and then the next morning, you know, I get up, and that was the longest walk ever down those stairs. I mean, it took everything I had in me to walk down those stairs because every ounce of my body wanted to just turn around, go get back in bed. And I was having all the thoughts and the feelings of this was a mistake. Things aren't that bad. You don't really need to be here. What are you doing? But I was like, no, get down there. You need to do this. And so I got down there. Everybody was super welcoming, had breakfast, and then I was introduced right off the bat. You know, it's, you know, at Chateau, you go right into a group. So I went right into a group, and everybody's sharing. You know, people already been there longer, so they're already used to sharing all the stuff. And man, I'm sitting there, and I was like, these people are messed up. It's like, what is going on? It's like, I'm like, I definitely don't need to be here because I got my shit together. I was just having whiskey with a breakfast burrito. I'm fine. I don't need to be here. And then the Chateau works its magic, and you start going, bleh, spilling all your stuff out. You're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty jacked up too. I need to be here. You know, it took me about a week, I would say, to really kind of fully embrace what was going on. And then again, and this is what I'm saying, like when I look back on my past, there was things that I could say, okay, that's negative, or I could blame, or I could be like, oh, why was it this way? Or I can reframe it and I can look at it. It's like, okay, what did I learn out of that that's positive? Well, the only way I know how to do things, and I did that same way with Chateau, is like I said, I don't have a 5. I got a 1 or a 10. And I was like, all right, I'm all in on this. And that's what I did. I just went all in. And whether this is right or wrong or whatever, and in the competitive nature in me, I'm winning. I'm winning recovery. But that's what works for me. And I know there's a fine line between confidence and being cocky and whatever else, but it was just like, that's just not how I know how to operate. So it's like, all right, well, can I reframe that into a positive? And I did. You could ask the folks who were there with me, the mentors or whatever. I was like, all right, I'm all in on this, and I ate it up, everything, every single bit of it. And we're coming up on about getting close to 30 days. I've probably been there about 20 days or so. And this is another thing too, looking back of stuff that I learned, and then I can apply it to this. I know myself. I know my body. And I know what it means to perform at a high level, whether it was as a professional athlete or a firefighter or whatever. And I did not feel that. I did not have that feeling. And I was like, there's no way I can walk out of here in 10 days and apply this to life and be good at it. So that's when I made a decision. It's like, I'm staying another 30, and I'm staying until I know I feel that I can walk out of these doors, not perfect, but I know I can start applying this and putting it into action where I feel good about it, where it's a part of me. It's not just a bunch of knowledge. So that's when, so like I said, I decided to stay 60 days. And then it was a little bit after the 30-day mark, a little bit in there. And I'm glad I did, because there's been a couple of times in life when I've felt like this. And again, people may think that this is selfish or whatever, but I don't care because it works for me. I had kind of like an epiphany almost, where I didn't necessarily make a commitment, but I made a declaration that it was like, I'm never living my life like that again. And I'm not doing it for anyone else. I'm doing it for me. And the reason I took that mentality is if I do this to save a relationship, or I do this to be closer to my kids, or I do this to be better at my job, well, what if my job goes away? What if my kids go away? What if my relationship goes away? And so it became all about me. And it was just like, boom, it was like a wall, boom, stepped over on the other side. I'm doing this for myself, and I'm making a declaration. I will never live my life like that again. And so it went up even another level of my commitment to what I'm going to do at the Chateau and how I'm going to set things up and start working to when I leave Chateau. That was kind of my mentality at Chateau and the way I approach things.
I think there's an important point that I'd like to draw out here, which is the latter part of your conversation you just had, which is who you were actually going to do your recovery for, who you were actually going to perform recovery for, which is yourself, the guy that's in the mirror, the guy that you stare at every day when you wake up. I feel like there's some kind of weird stigma that goes along when we start talking about self-love and self-care, truly talking about, taking care of ourselves and putting ourselves as a priority. And most times it sounds selfish. It oftentimes feels selfish. There was something that resonated with me a long time ago, early on in my recovery journey, that self-care looks selfish to people who don't understand what it is you're doing. I just want to point out that right there, I believe, has been the key to my recovery, is that I'm doing this for me. I learned how to appreciate myself, be true to myself, be honest with myself. And I think that's an important point that should not be just lightly passed over. The reason you're doing this is probably the weight of the success rests on that right there. So,
well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, that's exactly it. And to pull from being stuff that I learned from being an athlete. And that's why I say, like, I can't look negatively on everything in the past, because there's some good things that I learned. So part of that mentality is either hope or you expect. And people that, oh, I hope I win this game. Well, you're never going to win the game. You might luckily win one, but if you go out there and it's like you expect to be great, you're going to be great. And that's the way I approach recovery. It's like, no, I expect this. This is what I expect to happen. So,
no, that's great.
You got a great story, Doug. There's people that you just kind of remember. And I remember speaking to you on the phone, and I could hear and feel through the phone just the pain, the struggle, the want for something different. And that's not always the case. But, we enjoyed working with you. You're one of my favorites. I think I told you before, but tell us a little bit about after, man. This is where the rubber hits the road. And you and I had chatted about this before when I saw you in Colorado last. Was like, I'm sure you thought you had some things that were going to happen, and some things didn't happen, and then some things changed. So let's talk about that journey after and what you had to go through to be successful, because that is what you are. You are successful now in this journey. You hit the 10 and you embraced it. and you did something special with your life, and you seem to be happy. So tell us the secret sauce, man.
Well, I mean, if anything, it's in a nutshell, is you just keep moving forward. It's every day. You just keep moving forward. And and when I was leaving Chateau, I was scared shitless to get out in the real world. And then I did the IOP, and I had my individual therapist. So with that same mentality, I went all in on the IOP, and I met with my individual therapist once a week for a year post Chateau, and she pushed me. And that was one of the things I asked in my IOP, and I asked of my therapist is push me, challenge me, and she did. Like, would purposely, when the time was right. Like, one of the things for me was like going to the grocery store. I mean, I'd be white knuckling the grocery cart, and she, when the time was right, she would she's like, okay, it's time to go to the grocery store. And I'd be like, seriously? But I did it. I went, and we would pre-plan it. And actually we used fire service terms. We'd pre-plan it. We'd come up with an incident action plan to go to the grocery store. And then when I would meet with her the next week, we would do it like an after action review or a debrief, and we'd break it down, and we'd go step by step through how was the grocery store? What did you feel? What were you thinking? All right. And then we would draw it out. We'd make these diagrams. Like, okay, here's what happened. And then, bring it down. It's like, okay, what was the reality? Okay, bring it down, and just keep breaking it down. And it's pieces and parts. But that was one thing, was just, I challenged myself. And I didn't challenge it all in one day. It was in bits at a time that I did it. So that was one thing. It was definitely having something post Chateau, IOP, and an individual therapist. Another thing was taking back my life and making decisions for myself. And one of those was retiring from the fire department, where it was like, you know what, I've got enough that I'll be okay, but I don't have enough that I'll be okay forever. But I was like, you know what? And it kind of backs up to another thing at Chateau, was what makes my heart happy and what is my life worth. So post Chateau, I kept that going. It's like, okay, just being at the fire department fit that filter. Nope. All right, it's time to leave. Is it perfect? Nope. But I'll figure it out. And I just always had that mentality. It's like, I'll figure it out. And so then it was like, okay, where am I going to live? Well, the best thing for me right now is to go back to Texas, and I live with my parents for a year, and that was one of the best things I could have, because I was around sober people. My friends are sober, and so I was in a safe environment. And then, and I had moments where, like, you talk about, like, you go to Chateau, all this stuff doesn't just go away. I mean, I had moments like where all of a sudden it's like, man, the anxiety is going through the freaking roof. But I'd go back to what worked for me. And that was the thing, is like, of all the things that I learned at Chateau, I really had to break it down to, okay, I like this works for me. And so in its simplest form, what I've gotten into, where I understand, is if my anxiety is going up, it's like, basically stop. Okay, what's actually going on? And then evaluate it, understand it. How's it really affecting me? Okay, and then move on. And each time I would do that or go through that, I get stronger. I would rebuild that muscle. And the way I looked at it, and when I worked at my therapist, and one time she asked me, she's like, Doug, how long did you live your life your way you did pre-Chateau? And I'm like, decades. She's like, all right, you're taking decades of muscle memory in your brain. You did 60 days at Chateau. You've been out a month. So give yourself a break. You're building new neural pathways, and you're building new brain muscle memory, if you will. But each time I had a success, we celebrated it. Each time I had, even if I didn't have a success or I had a failure, we broke it down. But not only did we break it down, but we compared it back. So we, like, if I fell short on something, or like went to the grocery store and like thought I was going to throw up, then we took that and broke it down. It's like, okay, that looks like a failure, but let's compare it to the last time you went to the grocery store where you didn't even buy anything. I was like, okay. She's like, did you buy anything this time? I was like, yeah, I got like 3 things. She's like, okay. So that was better than last time. So we just kept that mentality going going like that. And then, and honestly, another thing I did too that worked for me is I didn't keep track of days sober or anything like that, because that to me, it didn't work. Because to me, it was like, I am sober. That's it. I don't need to know how many days it is, because I made that decision back at Chateau. This is me. I don't need to know. And it also didn't put on me like this, oh, I've got to make it 5 more days and I got 100. It's like, no, I'm just, so I couldn't even tell you right now how many days I've been sober. Oh, and another thing that we switched around is just terminology that I would use or how I refer to myself. And I don't want to, this is for me. This is what worked for me, and I'm not poo-pooing any recovery processes or groups or whatever, but I don't refer to myself as an alcoholic. I'm in recovery, or I'm just Doug. I'm sober Doug. Because the reason I didn't do that is because I didn't want to carry around those labels, if you will, because that's a big deal to me of like what you tell yourself or what you say about yourself is what you will become. And my therapist had me even reframe that with PTSD and anxiety and depression. She's like, look, you have PTSD, but you're not PTSD. So it's such a fine line, but it's if you think you are PTSD, then that's potentially what you become. So we reframe stuff. It was little simple things like that. It could be matter semantics or whatever, but that's how I view things. And that's how I viewed life around that, and just live my life each day like that. I thank her for a lot of that too. Those were some of the things that she pushed me on. Oh, and another thing too, what we did, we eventually got to the point in our therapy, and I think in that I kind of had this epiphany, if you will, or this realization, and she was like, awesome, that I had it on my own, was basically we hit a point where we stopped talking about stuff in the past, because I was like, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not. And it completely reframed the way I looked at the past, and almost looked at it as a positive light. There's been some great things that have come out of my life now because of what happened, and there's positive that I can pull from it that I can use today, and I'm a much better human being for it today. And so our sessions actually switched to where they actually started becoming life coaching sessions, and we didn't talk about shit in the past anymore. It's like, I'm like, I need to move on. I'm not that guy anymore.
Yeah. And that's okay. So Doug, this is one of the things I want to pass on to people who may be listening is the fact of the matter to me is it sounds like you made your journey your own. You owned it, which if we go back to some of the basic things that you're learning at Chateau is that this process has got to be yours. The labels, the everything that you instigated for your own self-help was yours. You owned it, you made it, it worked for you, and then you embraced it. And that's ownership, right? Our journeys are about ownership. But then also the big thing I'm hearing from you is that you worked for this. You put a lot of work and effort into not only once you were in treatment, but once you left, right? That's where it's the hardest part, man. Rubber hits the road. You worked on yourself. You worked on what your journey was going to be on, or in. You moved to your parents' home, which you probably didn't want to do immediately, but best thing for you. I mean, you went and told would be happiness, right?
Yeah, you kind of broke up there a little bit, but I think I kind of captured what you're saying there is yeah, I went all in on, and I did the work and kept applying the things that I learned at Chateau, kept working on the things through the IOP and my counselor, and stuff on my own. Like I would research on my own, and I'd find things on my own to do to help make myself better. It was purposeful every single day with what I did. Uh, and like now things that I'm doing, because I'm not doing the IOP anymore, obviously. But it's like it's in Dallas. It's called the Center for Brain Health, and they work with first responders and military. So what I did is they have a ongoing research program there, and so I signed up for the research program, and it's got it's daily work in there that you do and stuff for, basically it's strengthening the brain. So there was more stuff where it's like, okay, what else, what's the next thing that I can do to just keep strengthening my brain, because the brain can heal. the plasticity of the brain. It can heal. So what else can I do? And like you said, I mean, that's a big piece of it is, and if you want to take a page from the athlete book, is when you look at the greats or the greats in anything really, they do work outside of practice. So if you look at Chateau's like training camp. It's like, all right, well, what are you doing outside of training camp? Are you running extra laps? Are you showing up early to get a couple extra ground balls? Are you, you know, that's and I think that's a big piece of what makes a difference is what are you digging for and finding on your own? What extra work can you do that somebody's not telling you to do, that you're finding on your own, that you say, hey, I need to work on this, and you do it on your own.
Doug, I just want to kind of culminate our great conversation here and your amazing story with a couple kind of closing questions. If you have a message to
Mm-hmm.
actually send out there to some of the first responder community that is really struggling, question one was what would that message be? What would you tell folks who are, man, they just don't know where to turn, they're struggling, they're drinking too much, maybe they're uh, their lives are upside down in some form or fashion, pornography, running around, infidelity, spending, gambling. I mean, what's the message you'd give them?
That it's okay to get help, that it's not a knock on your toughness or machismo or bravery or whatever you want to call it, that it's okay to get help.
Well, and then the second question, and I know everyone's on pins and needles to know if you're still eating those fucking frozen burritos on a daily basis.
No, I mean, there's some stuff, man, I look back on, I'm like, oh, I don't think I could do that.
Hey Doug, I'm proud of you, man. You've worked hard to get here, and your smile and your energy exudes health, and it shows. And you've worked really hard to get here. I'm proud of you. I know you're proud of yourself. I think we lost Austin, so I'm going to speak on behalf of Austin and I both. Thank you so much for coming on. Obviously we love having you part of the Chateau team. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. Anytime.
Chateau Recovery is a 16-bed treatment facility nestled in the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains in Midway, Utah. Chateau's First Responder Resiliency Program is designed to treat the unique challenges and issues that first responders encounter in the course of their careers. Chateau's comprehensive and highly individualized approach to treatment addresses more than just the presenting issues. It addresses the why. Each of their seasoned, trauma-trained, and culturally competent therapists utilize evidence-based, specialized therapies to treat trauma at its core and enable clients to begin the healing process while developing a resilient and healthy relationship with stress. Chateau Recovery is trusted by departments and agencies from around the country to treat responders and veterans. In fact, it is one of only a handful of facilities nationwide that is vetted and approved to treat members of the Fraternal Order of Police. For more information or to speak to a representative, go to chateaurecovery.com or call 888-507-5031.
No One Fights Alone is also sponsored by First Responder Trauma Counselors. First Responder Trauma Counselors are subject matter experts in proactive behavioral health care for frontline workers through their National Peer Support Academy. This 40-hour all badges, all uniforms, and all scrubs educational experience helps to create caring, honest, and empathetic peer support relationships with your fellow frontline workers. The FRTC National Peer Support Academy is taught by actual first responders who have gone back to school to become culturally competent, licensed behavioral health clinicians that teach from lived experiences, not just theories from books. This fast-paced, immersive educational academy will not just change your life, it will help you save the lives of others. For additional details, visit 991overwatch.org or call 970-222-419-3. This could be the most life-changing academy you'll ever attend.